My name is Jeffrey Jansen. I'm the Vendor Relationship Officer here at PC Corp, and it's lovely to have you all here. And what are we here for? We're here about risk. There's risk in everything that we do, and reducing that risk is something that we all need to focus on. This is absolutely the case when it comes to computer security. We've been hearing about security for years, but because it's constantly changing and evolving, we need to do more than just look at a product or a service like an antivirus or a firewall to be secure. It has to be something a little bit more comprehensive. We get it. Understanding and implementing security can be overwhelming, confusing, disruptive, and even a little bit dangerous. And we can't look at implementing effective security as a point in time anymore. It is a journey. Everyone is somewhere on their security journey. And regardless of where you are, today we want to give you elements that will help you better safeguard your organization and even your home and allow you to focus on the benefits of the digital world. These elements that we'll speak of today all come under the umbrella of the term zero trust. I'm going to throw it over to Ryan to tell you a little bit what zero trust is all about.
Thanks very much, Jeff, and hello everyone. Good morning. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. My name's Ryan, account manager here at PC Corp. And just going back a little bit, my first memory with computers personally was, 1996. I was 4 years old, watching my tech-obsessed dad play Doom for the first time, much to my grandmother's chagrin. But since then, I've been enamored by technology, and as I got older, I became really interested in cybersecurity, especially pertaining around the human element. Who are these people? Why are they doing this? And ultimately, what's driving them to commit cybercrime? It used to be about prestige and notoriety, some guy drinking Mountain Dew in his mom's basement, and that does not exist anymore. Now, bad guys are set up no differently than software as a service organizations like Adobe. They're staffed with hundreds of people and are able to commit these crimes with impunity. They're sanctioned by their governments more often than not to do these attacks, and it's worth billions of dollars now. And payloads no longer are toolbars or faraway princes or family members asking for money so they can send you millions of dollars. It used to be almost like an annoying mosquito bite, but now they have the ability to carry payloads that can bring organizations down for days, weeks, or potentially forever. And in addition to this new normal of sophisticated and highly targeted attacks, we're now working in many different locations. Some of us are working from home at least a portion of the week. We're accessing data and the applications we use on personal devices. And on top of personal devices, we're probably trying to access that information on that device from an unsecured network, such as at home or at a Starbucks, a hotel location. How do you as an organization protect what's vital, your people and your data in this new normal? And this double whammy of sophisticated for-profit cybercrime and the shift in how and where we work has caused the traditional security protections you would have at your office to no longer be enough. The fortified perimeter-based defenses you would employ, such as a really strong, very good firewall appliance to monitor that incoming and outgoing traffic, like a good traffic cop, and antivirus, it's no longer enough to combat these new threats, like Jeffrey mentioned. And as users are no longer always in the office, and even if they were in the office full time, the applications and data they're using more often than not are in the cloud now. They're not on a server located in the office anymore, and that firewall at the office is not going to protect the users accessing data remotely. And how can you with confidence know that the device they're using isn't loaded with malware from kids using it to download free Roblox plugins or something like that? And wouldn't it be great if you could just take a step back and say, you know what, I'm not going to inherently trust anything anymore. If you want access to company applications and data, you must constantly prove who you are. And after you've proven who you are, I'm going to still control the entire experience end to end. You can play in our sandbox, but sandbox privileges can be revoked at any time, and you can't take any sand with you when you go home at the end of the day. This, in a nutshell, is zero trust. And it's very important here to remember that zero trust is a framework, and it's very much a philosophy. It's a state of mind of your organization. It's not a product Kelly can go quote you and put on a quote to go in order. It's a journey that, believe it or not, all of you are on right now. And it's not a race, and your specific needs will largely determine where and how the zero trust model is adopted. At its foundation, Zero Trust is made up of three guiding principles, and these principles are applied in all aspects of your environment, which we've defined as 6 key pillars, which Jeffrey and I will go through individually. The first key pillar of Zero Trust is verify explicitly, which means that we're now not just going to blindly trust something because it's located in an office and we've signed in for the first time in the day. We're now going to verify every single session to every single resource. And we're now going to constantly revalidate identities of users, service principals, applications, devices, everything. Everything must always be verified and verified explicitly. Number 2 is least privilege. And what least privilege means is we're just going to provide users with enough access to fulfill and complete their tasks with just enough time to complete those tasks and nothing more. We're not just going to leave a door open at the end of the night for anybody to just come in potentially to take a look around. We're going to very much control the end-to-end experience and duration that users have access to. And it's very important here to look at things like administrative rights and ensuring that no user has permissionings above and beyond what they need to actually just do their work. Number 3 is assume breach. And like it mentions, we're going to now assume that there's bad actors on the network. And this is why verifying the health, user risk, device risk, location risk, sign-in risk is so important. And we're going to validate the traffic constantly as any connection or any service is being used at any moment in time. And we're going to collect signals here. And this is so important because it ensures that if something did come in, well, it's not a surprise because we've already anticipated it to happen. And abnormal behavior can be flagged and additional decision making can happen at that time. And with this, I'll now pass it back to Jeff to talk about the first pillar of the IT environment, which is identity.
Thank you, Ryan. So identity. Why is identity important? Quite simply, identity is the new security perimeter and verifying and securing user identities and their access privileges. And why is that? Well, again, going back to our earlier statements, in the past, you used to be behind a perimeter firewall. You used to have access control, you used to have antivirus and a bunch of other tools inside the office to protect your environment. But as threats have changed, as your workplace may have changed, what is now the entryway, the gateway into your environment and your applications and data? It's you. So the importance of verifying who you are or who anyone is who's entering into your network becomes key. The way to do that in a lot of cases is to consider things like multi-factor authentication. What is multi-factor authentication? Quite simply, it's other methods and means to verify who you are. Typically, it's something that you know, something that you have, or something that you are. And basically what that means, in the old days, you used to have a username and password, and that was typically good enough to secure you because you had all of these other defenses. Now, as Ryan mentioned, you might be going off to an internet site, you might be working from home, and a single username and password is the only protection against that information. So what we want to do is we want to enhance that by offering additional layers. And with introducing these additional layers, you have more security. It's very much like when you go to the airport and you're about to go on a trip. In order to get to your plane, there are a number of checks, and all of those checks are to verify your identity. So you walk up to the counter. You have to present typically a passport and your boarding pass. They'll look at your picture, ensure that it's you. And even after you've gone through that process, it continues. You'll go through the security screening. They're going to check again. You'll get to your gate. They're going to check again. And even if you're in the airport and have the ability to walk in the lounge or walk around the airport secure area, it doesn't necessarily mean you need to have access to the maintenance or the runway. So again, identity is going to help the airport maintain security by only allowing you to come in if you're verified and only allowing you access to the areas that you need to. So I'm going to kick this back over to Ryan, and he's going to talk a little bit about endpoints.
Thanks, Jeff. And an endpoint is simply just a laptop, a desktop, any little device with a computer inside it that can process data and communicate with a network of some kind. And The amount of endpoints these days has absolutely exploded. There's now things like Internet of Things devices at office locations or even at your house that may be monitoring things like temperatures, humidity sensors, and users on average now are typically using 4 to 5 different devices to try and access organizational information and applications. And how do we protect and secure that organizational information and your applications that you use, but at the same time enhance productivity and employee experience by reducing the friction when it comes around device use? Well, it's pretty simple. You just ensure that both organizationally owned devices that are provided to users and the devices they try and use themselves go through the same baseline checks and balances before any access is permitted. The first thing that we need to check is the physical layer of the device itself. We want to ensure, and this is why Windows 11 was so difficult to upgrade to, is the trusted platform modules. This is a little piece of hardware that is built and baked inside the laptop that when you turn it on, the Windows operating system and BIOS is looking for this trusted platform module, verifying it, and ensuring that there's no way for bad actors to snoop in during that initial boot sequence. And that's very much the baseline check and balances, regardless of what that device is, that must happen first. And part two is policy and compliance enforcement. So we're going to set up a number of policies that both equally organizationally owned devices and personal devices must go through. And what this means is that there's no different methods for users depending on their dynamic of work. Everybody goes through the same controls, the same process. Nobody gets to feel left out or different because of where they are. Everybody goes through the same policy and compliance enforcement. And what's so nice about this as well is it's behind the scenes. It's outside of the purview of the user. The user just requests access, gets what they need, and they're able to work and work efficiently. If that's in an Uber, at an airport, like Jeffrey mentioned, at home, at the office, wherever they may be, that policy and compliance enforcement is there to ensure and mitigate against any potential risk on that device itself. And with this policy and compliance enforcement, we could set up different levels of access as well. Say you're at the airport logging in from public Wi-Fi on a brand new device you bought in anticipation of the trip. Well, maybe you're granted access, but because the system has an understanding that, wait a minute, you're using a personal device, I'm going to allow you access to view, but you can't download anything. You can't manipulate that document or that file in any way. You get to see it, but that's it. Where somebody at the office accessing the same information, that policy and compliance enforcement engine has an understanding of, oh, he's located in the office, he's using a device that's provided by the organization, there's a lot more controls in place. I'm going to allow additional capability because the risk assessment is a lot more minimal than a personal device using at an airport or wherever you may be. And in addition to the security benefits, again, it greatly enhances the employee experience by ensuring that it's seamless. And we want to ensure that Jeffrey mentioned, that services like multi-factor authentication are introduced as well, so that like magic, they have access to what they need, where they need it, and when.
Thank you, Ryan. So we're talking about endpoints, but just because the endpoint is protected and you've actually come in and the system has verified who you are, we need additional controls. Again, this is a multi-layered approach that is comprehensive. And everything that's happening on that endpoint also has to happen on the infrastructure, on the servers that you have within your organization. And what it's doing, it's using telemetry and other information to detect attacks and anomalies, and automatically blocks and flags risky behavior and vulnerable products. In order to do that efficiently, there's a couple of things that we need to do. So first off, we want to ensure that all firmware is up to date. And firmware basically are a set of instructions that sit on the device in the software at the very base level, and that controls the individual components and application areas within a server. So having the firmware updated prevents people from finding exploits in old or potentially vulnerable software, and allows us to continue to plug the holes to ensure that you have a safe environment. Another key element is to reduce the amount of administrator accounts. So specifically ones that aren't needed, or else allowing people to work in or come in as users as a baseline, and only elevating those privileges if they need to, for example, install software. What's the benefit of that? Well, quite simply, in the old days, where it was really nice just to be able to install software and remove software and make updates to your computer, well, when you have administrator access and you're logged in, if somebody, for example, were to able to log in as you and had administrator access, they could potentially do a lot more on your system than if they just had basic user access. Also, with some of the technologies that are available today, software can be actually installed behind the scenes without you even knowing it. And having an administrator account or somebody logged in as an administrator could allow that to happen. If you're logged in just as a user, what would end up happening is as that background application tried to install itself, you would get a pop-up and it would say, oh, you're trying to install software. Do you want to do this? And if so, you need administrator access. So you can elevate your access at that point if you're the one that's installing the software and you know what's happening. And you can also refuse it if that's not you that's doing it. So again, the importance of restricting the amount of accounts that have administrator privileges and having very, very good control of that infrastructure will absolutely help secure the home base. And I'm going to throw it back to Ryan to talk a little bit about the network.
So the network in the olden days was the front door of your environment, and you locked that front door with things like a firewall to monitor incoming and outgoing traffic. And when you were in the office and you logged in on a company provided or organizationally provided device and you were in the office, you were seen as inherently trusted. And I was sanctioned to access applications and data pretty much with impunity. But this front door now has become porous due to shifting trends in work habits and where data and applications now are housed. And because of this, the network is no longer the answer. It can't be the front door because we can no longer trust the network. And going back to zero trust, we must verify explicitly, assume breach. And because of that, we can't trust our office network anymore, and we have to treat it no differently than we do the Wild West of the internet. And with that, well, how do we protect the network? Well, every bit of information that's transported from an endpoint, an application, or a service principal of some kind should have end-to-end encryption, which simply means that if some bad guy was trying to take a look at that information, all they see is meaningless noise, not the real information, and there's no way for them to rejumble that noise to make reality visible for them in terms of what they're able to see. And this is critical, and this should be done when the bits of information or the services are at rest, not being used, when they're actively being transported and in use as well. And again, zero trust dictates that we have to do least privilege. So we need to restrict network traffic flows to only what is needed to do the job. And we need to ensure that policies are in place to restrict traffic and only provide access to what is needed to fulfill the work required and for only the set duration as well. And just because the network is not the answer anymore, it can't be the front door. It still has a very important role to play. And going back to the airport example, the traditional firewall was very much kind of like a security scanner that you'd put your luggage in. That got very confused trying to figure out, is that a handgun or is that a hairdryer? But now with next generation firewalls, with technologies like intrusion prevention, that scanner now knows the exact specific contents and whereabouts, to the millimeter of what's in your luggage. And cybersecurity is very much layered, and we want defense in depth, like a big, juicy security onion. And just because it's not the answer, it still plays a vital role in securing your infrastructure and applications that must remain or still are on premises. And we're just shifting away now from seeing that intranet as the safe haven to no longer trusting it and ensuring that all interactions are verified explicitly, providing just enough access and just in time for users to complete whatever tasks are required.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to jump over to applications. And this pillar focuses on securing the applications, the software, and their associated data. One of the key elements in this area is to discover shadow IT. What is shadow IT? Quite simply, shadow IT is those instances where users, not in a malicious fashion, potentially would use convenience applications, convenience software to complete the tasks that they needed to do if the the appropriate software, let's say, was not provided by the organization. I'll give you an example. Obviously, during COVID, a lot of us had to move from the office to home quite quickly, and in some cases had to go back and forth between home and office. It may have made it inconvenient for using large files or accessing that database or something that was required. So maybe what happened is people started up and they spun up their own Dropbox or Google Docs or their own personal OneDrive, and they started storing information in those areas. It was great from a productivity standpoint, and in a lot of cases, we did what we needed to do to keep working. But now, of course, there's this concern that there's all of this data, all of this information that's company owned and maybe proprietary, that now may be sitting in little pockets all over the place. It's not secured, potentially. It doesn't have the same controls on it as your corporate data. So really what we want to do is we want to first assess and analyze what tools are being used in an organization. We want to only have company sanctioned resources and applications being used. And we want to basically ensure that policy controls are put into place. So again, if I'm one of those, an employee, and I log on to the system, much like not being able to go into the maintenance area of the airport or the runway, I shouldn't be given access to financial information, the HR folder, other areas like that. What we really want to do is ensure that the people going into specific areas need to go into those. And we also want to make sure that there are policies and controls in there that don't allow people to access things unless they absolutely need to. And the reason for that is we want to introduce microsegmentation, this blast radius that Ryan had spoken of earlier, where again, if somebody were to gain access to a system or an application, it restricts them from going from place to place, and they only have very, very small access. And the importance of that, I think, can be demonstrated in, let's say, going into your hotel room. So you're on vacation, again, you go into your hotel room, and the first thing you do is you unpack your clothes. Maybe you put some things in the closet, you put some toiletries in the bathroom, but you have your valuables. You have your jewels, your passport, your cash. What you may want to do is actually use the in-room safe to put those items in it. And why is that? It's because even though you're behind a locked door in your hotel room, there may be instances while you're away from the room that maintenance staff or cleaning staff need to come in. And while it's fine for them to have your clothes and your toiletries exposed, those really critical items, those really valuable items, you want to offer another layer of protection to them. So by having them in that hotel safe, it just means that there's one extra layer for them to have to go through if somebody were to get to that item. So this is what the importance of application security is all about. And all of this goes back to the last point, which is data.
Thanks, Jeff. And again, if zero trust, if you zoom out, let's say 10,000 feet out, and if the ultimate point of zero trust is to provide secure access to applications, the entire point of applications is to access data. And if identity is the new front door, data is the central focus of a zero trust world. It's what ultimately matters, like Jeffrey mentioned. It's that safe in your hotel room. It's what the bad guys are after. It's what they're buying and selling on the dark web or using as leverage to launch even more sophisticated attacks later on in the future. And data is essentially the DNA of what makes your organization your organization. And thinking of your data, what's most important? That's really the first step, is to classify and discover that data and inventory it and start looking to label that data. Does it contain personally identifiable information? Does it contain sensitive data such as financial information, social insurance numbers? We want to start looking at technologies like data masking to hide credit card numbers, SIN numbers automatically when new documents or data is entered. And we want to provide least privilege, like Jeffrey mentioned. We don't want everybody being able to see this confidential HR and financial data, only those that truly need to see it and only for the amount of time that they need to get their work done. Once that's complete, that connection is severed. We're not leaving anything hanging around just for the sake of hanging around anymore. And very similar to the network, we want protection on the data and to follow the data. Kind of like a committed guard dog that's always snooping around, sniffing signals, looking for strange behavior, and always learning what that normal behavior is, so it can help, again, sniff out that anomalous activity. And strange things could be like bulk downloads or large copies of information and putting things on personal devices or copying it into Dropboxes and personal OneDrives, like Jeffrey mentioned. We want to ensure that every time a human or a service, a resource, an application of any kind that accesses your data, it must always be validated. And what we're going to do on, again, in like personal devices, again, that need to have access, we're going to create that blast pocket within their device itself. So you carve out a piece of organizational real estate within that device that contains the information that they're using. And in a moment's notice, in an insider threat situation or an offboarding at a moment's notice, we can now pop that bubble. We can ensure that in a fraction of a second, essentially, we can take that data and remove it. And that is critical to ensure that no matter what device is being used, again, because we have an understanding of both organizational and bring your own devices through policy and compliance, that no matter where that data is trying to be accessed, we can control it end to end and ensure that nobody can take information and harvest it and compile it and do whatever they want with it. You have full control over it, including the duration of access.
Hey, thank you very much, Ryan. So the idea here is we wanted to give you a glimpse into this and to the concept of zero trust. And a zero trust approach means treating any network as compromised and assuming that threats, both internal and external, are always present. As mentioned, the solution is not static, and it needs to grow and evolve just like your business does over time. This is a journey, and like any journey, having a good map, good tools, and a good guide can help keep you safe. As also I mentioned, it can be confusing and overwhelming, even daunting, but it doesn't have to be. PC Corp has the teams and the resources that will help. We can bring actionable items to your business that will benefit you and make your organization more secure. We will be reaching out to you about how we can help you along this journey, or if you want more information, need to confirm where your organization is, or want to explore solutions, we're here to assist.